Well, hello, dear listener. Thank you for once again joining me for My Life as a Critic, where I take 16 years as a film critic, some of them as a professional film critic. There's a difference. When I started, I was not a professional. When I became a member of the Broadcast Film Critics Association, 2009, 2010, when I became a member, that's when I took on the mantle of professional film critic. Even though at the time I was on, when I became a member, I was already on 3 radio stations with pretty solid coverage over Iowa and Illinois. So I mean that's no one just gives you that. You have to be good at what you do to have people believe in you. Shout out to Dan Kennedy at WOC in Davenport, Iowa, and to Jim O'Hara, both of whom who allowed me the opportunity to be the film critic for stations WOC and Mix 96, and WLLR. Pat Luke, I owe him a little something there too. I was on those radio stations. I was on 4 radio stations with my reviews. I was unofficially the film critic for what was then the Quad City Radio Group, and it opened a lot of doors for me, including that door to the becoming a member of the Broadcast Film Critics Association, which has been a very rich and fulfilling experience. And maybe we'll talk about that sometime if we do any kind of one-off episodes where we abandon the premise and just kind of ramble. But let's get to the point. Let's get to this episode. Let's get to what we're going to talk about today, which a review I wrote in 2007 of the movie Planet Terror. I've had an interesting relationship with Robert Rodriguez as a director. I think I've liked much of what he's done, but I can recall really not liking Planet Terror. And here I go again, looking at another review that I wrote of a movie I don't like. I promise you, eventually I will get to one I do like, but I'm picking these at random. I found this one on my recovered MySpace blog, and to be fair to myself, when I read these reviews and I read them back without unvarnished, trying not to correct anything. Obviously, I want to make this an easy listen for you, so I will try and make it conversational and speak it in a way that is interesting and makes sense. So try and paper over some problem. But when it came to the MySpace blog that I was writing on in 2007, that was where I was putting drafts of reviews for friends to look at. The final product was going on, let's see, 2007. I'm not sure if that was guessthegross.com or smart-popcorn.com. One of those two was where I was writing it at the time. And I think I might have been on the radio station blog at that point, but so these were based. So what I'm going to read to you is basically just a draft of a final review that I would then either use on the radio or post to one of the websites. So this that I'm going to read to you now is my 2007 review of Planet Terror, and please, Robert Rodriguez fans, be kind. Director Robert Rodriguez knows a little something about high camp. His Spy Kids movies, earnest as they were, often drifted across the line from family comedy to high camp gobbledygook. The same could be said for a portion of his cult vampire flick From Dusk Till Dawn, a film that wavers between horror and high camp, Roger Corman feature. For his latest feature, half of the Grindhouse double feature Planet Terror, Rodriguez takes camp well beyond Roger Corman's wildest dreams. This off-the-charts nutty sci-fi zombie flick flies far off the rails in terms of camp kitsch. And it's difficult to tell if his attempt is at homage or parody. An ex-military unit, just back from Iraq, unleashes a deadly toxin that turns citizens into flesh-eating zombies in Planet Terror. Robert Rodriguez's contribution to the Grindhouse. Did I read that part already? No, this is me just repeating myself again. Rose McGowan stars as Cherry Darling, a go-go dancer who aspires to be a stand-up comic. Freddie Rodriguez is her ex-boyfriend, El Rey, a former sniper-turned-criminal. Somehow both Cherry and El Rey are resistant to the zombie toxin, and with a small band of survivors, sets out to battle the military behind the attack. That is a rather straightforward description of a not very straightforward effort. From interviews, you get the impression that Rodriguez intends to pay tribute to the low-budget sci-fi trash that he grew up watching. However, much of Planet Terror plays like a bad parody in the vein of 2004's Lost Skeleton of Cadabra, another lame attempt at sci-fi send-up. There are a few cool things about Planet Terror, the coolest thing being Rose McGowan's kick-ass M16 leg. After Cherry is attacked by a zombie and loses a leg, El Rey first fashions a table leg, which he puts to good violent use. However, she later gets a new leg, and this one has awesome firepower and makes for a very cool visual. The rest of McGowan's performance is a relative disaster of overly arched delivery and poorly delivered punchlines. The trailer for Grindhouse played up the gun leg and the badass action elements of her performance. Watching Planet Terror, you may be quite surprised how ineffectual and often in the background Ms. McGowan is. The badass of the movie is the slight baby-faced Freddie Rodriguez. Not the most likely action star, Freddie Rodriguez is actually an inspired bit of casting. Back in the day when this type of low-budget flick was made, directors could rarely get the actor they wanted for the money they could pay, and often ended up with miscast leads. Rodriguez as a bad boy action stud is a cute little inside joke nod to those low-budget days. The trouble with Planet Terror falls squarely with director Robert Rodriguez, who fails to establish a consistent tone of sincere homage or high camp send-up. There are little touches that would work, like the small role for legendary special effects man Tom Savini and the occasional use of his old-school effects rather than CGI. Then there's the plenty that doesn't work, like most of Rose McGowan's performance and the film's many gross-out moments, which are so stomach-turningly disgusting that many will want to walk out. These gross-out moments further muddy Rose McGowan's performance and the film's many gross-out moments, which are stomach-turningly disgusting. This is what I wrote. And many will want to walk out. The gross-out moments further muddy the waters of Robert Rodriguez's intentions with Planet Terror, the homage versus parody battle that unsettles the entire picture. Some of the gross-out is funny, some of it is merely off-putting. When compared with the film it shares the double bill with, Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof, Planet Terror is an utter disaster, where Tarantino provides sincere homage combined with highly skilled filmmaking. Rodriguez can't decide what he's doing, and ends up tossing anything and everything at the screen to see what sticks. When it comes to Grindhouse, wait for the DVD. That way you can skip Planet Terror and just watch Death Proof. And that is my review of Planet Terror. I thought I remembered disliking it a lot more, but I seem to have some appreciation for it. When I'm talking about in that review, when I'm saying when it comes to the homage parody comparison, which there are some sentences in there that really, really turn on themselves. Oh, yeah. This has been the hardest review to read so far. That's part of the high wire act of doing this, just realizing when you're reading it, when you're reading your own words, something that you wrote, that you wrote something terrible. There are some terrible sentences and recapping of previous sentences in there that I cannot obviously be proud of. But I guess what I was getting at is that you can't tell at times, and this is just me recalling a memory from 2007, you can't recall at times in that movie where it seems like Robert Rodriguez actually wants to scare you, or he wants you to be kind of grossed out by this movie. Like he's taking it seriously and not actually creating a send-up. And that's where it got confusing, if I'm recalling myself correctly. It's in that kind of almost the tone of seriousness that he kind of gives it, where he wants you to actually be moved by this as if it were a good sci-fi movie, and not just a rehash of cliches from the movies that influenced him growing up, the genuinely bad movies that he appreciated on an ironic level. I recall the classic Simpsons line, "Are you being sarcastic, dude? I don't even know anymore." That you can't tell if Robert Rodriguez is being sarcastic or he just doesn't even know if he's being sarcastic, and that's pretty much what I thought of Planet Terror at the time, was that I just don't know if he was kidding or if he was serious. And either way, it wasn't going to work for me because the film was just too gross. So we'll pause here. I will watch the movie. You will have hardly any time pass at all. And we'll be back after this as I kick on the old projector. Well, this movie is quite a journey, I tell you. For me, emotionally and intellectually, I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wrote back in 2007 while I was watching the movie, and something interesting occurred to me, or at least I think it's interesting, that Planet Terror is indicative of something of my generation. And Robert Rodriguez and I are both members of Generation X, a generation that is defined by our sarcasm, in that we are the generation that invented the idea of, look at this thing I love. Isn't it wonderful how terrible it is? Ironic appreciation is a concept that Generation X invented, or at least we claim it. Maybe other generations had it as well. I doubt it. But we perfected it. We perfected a stance of being able to both love something and reject it at the same time, because our generation was born of a severe insecurity. We can't own anything, or at least as young people, we were rejecting the idea of actually owning something because we were afraid someone else might tell us it's not good. That's a big deal to us. Sarcasm became our language because we didn't want to take ownership of the things we were saying in case somebody disagreed with us, because we were insecure. So sarcasm, born of insecurity, allowed us the opportunity to both say we like something, but also say, but it's terrible. I love this 70s sci-fi because it's so bad. And that's Robert Rodriguez in Planet Terror. It's not kind of like the ultimate Gen X movie in that way, because it's Robert Rodriguez taking something that he loved, which was bad 70s sci-fi, and holding it up to ridicule and saying, "You see how horrible this is? Isn't it great?" And that's Planet Terror. This is really terrible, isn't it? How much fun is that? And that's my generation in a nutshell. We were incapable of any kind of sincerity, and then you take a piece of art from our generation, like Planet Terror, and it's impossible to find a way to apply a sincere criticism to it, because it's all ironic posturing. It's all a stance. Like, well, of course it's not very good. I made it bad intentionally to show people how bad 70s sci-fi was, so it's intentionally a bad movie. And this is an argument that I've had with people a lot over the years, is that I can't get behind the idea of making something intentionally bad. This came up during the Sharknado debate. I was part of on my podcast, I Hate Critics, which you can listen to. It's my weekly podcast that I do with two really good friends of mine, Bob and Josh. We do this podcast, and we talked about Sharknado, and I talked about how I don't like anything that is intentionally bad. When you make something intentionally bad, it lacks any kind of purity. It lacks any kind of intention. You can just disown it, and you can get away with anything because you intentionally made it bad, so it doesn't mean anything. And that's Sharknado. It doesn't mean anything because they never intended it to be any good. There's so much more interesting to me, and so much more I can appreciate in something like, say, The Room, where Tommy Wiseau had a genuine thought that he was making something brilliant, and he made something terrible. And there's a wonderfully there's a wonderful nobility to that I can appreciate. Tommy Wiseau is awful as a director, but I appreciate the noble failure. I appreciate the idea that he set out to do something great and failed so spectacularly. It's the same feeling I have about M. Night Shyamalan, who is another director better than Tommy Wiseau, but he's a guy who has great big ideas like The Village or Lady in the Water, and then his execution of those ideas is such a remarkable failure, like The Happening, that you actually, or at least I do, I kind of marvel at the audacity and the remarkable failure that came of such audacity. I appreciate that. I laugh at it and I'm sarcastic about it, but I appreciate the attempt. And that's kind of an ironic posture because that's my generation. That's what we do. We can't actually own our thoughts. We have to be sarcastic. If my generation had a crest, it would be a pair of eyes rolling backwards in someone's head and the word whatever. Because that's really who we are. We're so insecure of our own opinion that we refuse to actually own anything. So we say everything with sarcastic quotation marks so that we can disown it later, which is kind of a weird thing for me now. Because I guess growing up and getting older and having like a generation come up behind you, especially when you're talking about very young children, and I'm talking like 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, where they're starting to become aware of things. They do not understand sarcasm. It makes no sense to them. They cannot comprehend it. For the most part, I'm making a blanket statement, but children don't understand sarcasm. So if you're sarcastic toward a child, they don't get it. And it confuses them and hurts their feelings more. Whereas a group of Gen Xers in a room can be completely disingenuous to each other, and that's just language. And it's funny. Just this movie that is not good inspired this line of thought, and our sarcasm. The sarcasm. I was close to the idea in my original review. I was close to the idea, and I think I've hit upon it about regarding sarcasm and my generation. Planet Terror is a perfect reflection of my generation because it is a sarcastic depiction of something that Robert Rodriguez sincerely loves. He sincerely loves bad 70s sci-fi. He loves it because it isn't any good. He appreciates it for being bad. And I'm speaking for him. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. That's the opinion I take away watching the movie, is that he appreciates bad 70s sci-fi for being bad and having bad ideas. And then he takes that and he fully recreates it as a movie and then offers you the opportunity to point and laugh as he is pointing and laughing with you. And then we all identify with each other. But of course, none of us owns that opinion, and we can all back away from it if we have to because we're being sarcastic. It's the most wonderful pretzel logic. It allows you to believe in something and yet laugh at it at the same time and maintain your insecurity. My parents' generation were an angry, cynical generation. Baby boomers were defined by their anger and cynicism. They began life very open to big ideas, and then they had actual things happen to them. Whereas my generation grew up and we looked at our parents and said, well, why are you so angry and cynical? And then they gave us actual reasons, like Vietnam and Watergate and the Kennedys being assassinated and Martin Luther King and civil rights. They gave us actual reasons why they were angry and cynical. And our only response to that could be rolling our eyes and shrugging our shoulders and going, whatever, and just tuning them out. And that pose came to define who we are. And it's fascinating that the next generation, it's as if the anger and cynicism of our parents' generation curdled into the sarcasm of Generation X that is now being cured by the penicillin of sincerity of the next generation, the millennials. this is a very sincere generation that does not get sarcasm, that is genuinely able to believe in things like Bernie Sanders or, various different ideas, sincere music like Taylor Swift or even Bieber. They were able to believe in those things without disowning that belief, whereas my generation looks at Taylor Swift, and even if we like what we hear, we try and put a distance between it. Yeah, no, Shake It Off's okay. Something like that. Just that we can't own the feeling. We're too insecure to actually own a feeling about Taylor Swift, so we have to identify ourselves. Whereas millennials, like my niece Maisie, genuinely likes Taylor Swift and has a genuine appreciation for her. My generation is incapable of that. Maybe Kurt Cobain, maybe because he died so young, maybe we're all able to coalesce around him, but for the most part when we were coming up, and you can only really do this as a teenager and an early 20-something when your opinion doesn't matter in any way, which, sorry millennials, you'll learn eventually that nothing you believe matters. Because you're so young you can't change anything. Maybe you can, I don't know. Maybe that's just more of my own cynicism, but the cynicism of a 40-year-old. But when I know when I was a teenager and a 20-something, my opinions did not matter at all because I was too insecure to back them up with anything. Maybe your sincerity offers you the security to try and back up what you believe in, and maybe that'll make a difference. But for me, nothing I believed in mattered. I could do anything, and it didn't matter because I had an ironic distance from it, a sarcastic detachment that allowed me to later disown it if I had to or wanted to. Then being a grown-up actually forces you to have to own opinions because people count on you. You become bosses, or you become coworkers, or you become a family, and there are people who actually depend on you actually believing something, and what you think matters in that way. It forces you to take on a particular kind of sincerity that you then can only abandon in the company of other Gen Xers. where your insecurity is able to return and live through your sarcastic detachment to the things you love. This is the thought that watching Planet Terror inspired, and my original review came close to this idea. Didn't quite have it in 2007, but I have it now. Really Planet Terror is kind of landmark in a weird way. As much as Death Proof is an actual good movie, where Tarantino didn't merely rehash and recreate the thing that entertained him as a kid, he took 70s exploitation revenge films and applied his talent and actually made a loving homage that also improved upon the thing that he loved. Robert Rodriguez merely recreated the thing that he loved and then stepped back and pointed and laughed. And that's Planet Terror. And that's why I don't like Planet Terror. It's intentionally bad and impossible for me to criticize because they don't actually mean any of the things that they do. There's no honest, sincere intention in any way behind Planet Terror. It's specifically about standing back, pointing and laughing. I love that because it's so terrible. Which is something that only my generation is capable of. It's a pretzel logic that we're the only ones that are capable of. Millennials can kind of understand The Room, like they get objectively that it's bad, but they don't understand it the way we do as my generation. Because we're the only ones who can truly look at something that is genuinely terrible and tell other people, wow, that is really awful. I love it so much. That is something that the millennials do not get for the most part. And talking to my niece, she does not understand the ironic, detached appreciation of something. She has a genuine appreciation of things. She watches The Room and goes, why would you watch this? This is terrible. Whereas I watch it and I laugh and laugh and laugh at Tommy Wiseau. Like Icarus toward the sun, doom awaiting him, but hope in his eyes. It's him, or like I said, M. Night Shyamalan in many ways, Ed Wood, a legendary first example of the idea of sincere, honest-to-God failure. Russ Meyer doesn't quite fit that, because Russ Meyer knew everything. Russ Meyer was a cynic. He was a guy who was making movies to make money, and he was going to do anything to make money, no matter how exploitative. Ed Wood had pretension toward greatness and failed in the most beautiful way. Something that I think Tim Burton captured beautifully and Johnny Depp captured beautifully in Ed Wood. And Shyamalan, there is a real, genuine sincerity to all of his work. He believes in everything that he does. And then he fails in such the most beautiful and fantastic and terrible ways that I look at it and I laugh and I point, but I admire him secretly. I admire his ability to just really put himself out there and put his idea on the line and fail in such a spectacular way. If you're going to fail, fail big, you know? And at the Elizabethtown, I take that from Cameron Crowe. Cameron Crowe understands this concept very well from that movie. If you're going to fail, fail big. Fail spectacular. Then go back to work the next day and make them wonder why you're still smiling. And that's the career, and it perfectly defines M. Night Shyamalan, because I don't know why he's still smiling. After Earth, Last Airbender. What are you smiling about? These are objectively terrible films. But I admire you, though. I do. I admire M. Night Shyamalan for the spectacular level of his failure. The Wachowskis, another great example. Jupiter Ascending, and there is just a spectacularly big idea that fails so miserably. The Cloud Atlas, same way. Spectacularly big idea. Fails miserably, but I appreciate it. And I'm not sure if... I'm thinking that is really a generational thing, because other generations look at that and just go, it's bad, and they leave it be, and it's gone forever for them. But stuff like The Happening will always be with me, because it's so bad, but I love it for being so bad. It's objectively bad. It's a terrible movie, and I hate how terrible it is. But I admire the audacity behind the idea so much that it makes me like it. And so me and Robert Rodriguez are kind of on the same page, because we're trying so hard to just point and laugh at something and have other people laugh with us. But yet we have a sincere appreciation for what we're looking and pointing and laughing at. So this has been my Planet Terror episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I appreciate any comments that you have. Feel free to comment away, and if you want to disagree, that's fine. If you're a Gen Xer who is capable of sincerity, I would love to hear from you. You are a rare breed, because every other Gen Xer that I know is just as sarcastic and insecure as I am, and that's why we love each other so much. This has been My Life as a Critic. I'm Sean Patrick.